Here is the story with numbers removed and formatted for readability. The Envoy. Frank Patterson stood at the observation deck of Earth's orbital station watching the stars. After 30 years as a diplomat, he thought he had seen everything. He was wrong. The arrival of the Vicari 6 months ago had changed everything for humanity. Frank adjusted his formal blue uniform, making sure the golden Earth emblem on his chest gleamed under the lights. Today was the most important day of his career. Today he would become the first human to board an alien vessel as Earth's official ambassador. Nervous? Asked a voice behind him. Frank turned to see Admiral Diane Morris walking toward him. Her military uniform was decorated with medals that told the story of her service to Earth's defense forces. Not nervous, Frank replied with a small smile, just aware of the responsibility. Diane stopped beside him, looking out at the same view. The massive Vicari mother ship hung in space, its crystalline surface catching the sunlight. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. "I don't trust them," Diane said quietly. "There's something in their messages that doesn't feel right." Frank had known Diane for 20 years. She was not someone who feared easily, but she was also rarely wrong about her instincts. "That's why they sent me," Frank said. "To figure out if they can be trusted." Diane turned to face him directly. "The Concord leaves in 2 hours. I've personally checked every system. Captain Winters knows his job." "Greg is a good man," Frank agreed. "His crew is the best Earth has to offer." The Concord was Earth's newest diplomatic vessel, built with a mixture of human innovation and technology learned from previous, less advanced alien encounters. It wasn't a warship, but it wasn't defenseless either. "I've added extra security to your team," Diane said. "Sam Miller leads the detail, former Special Forces. He doesn't look like security, but he can handle himself if things go bad." Frank nodded. Sam had been at the briefings, a quiet man with observant eyes who looked more like an administrative assistant than a soldier. That was probably the point. "The Vicari have been nothing but polite in all our communications," Frank reminded her. "Their technology is at least a century ahead of ours. If they wanted to harm us, they could have done it already." Diane's expression didn't change. "Keep your emergency protocols active. I don't care how friendly they seem." Frank smiled, touched by her concern. 30 years in diplomacy, Diane. I've never failed to forge an agreement yet." The next 2 hours passed quickly. Frank met with his team in the final briefing room. 12 people in total would go on this mission: linguists, scientists, cultural experts, and security personnel disguised as assistants. "Remember," Frank told them, "we represent not just Earth, but all of humanity. The Vicari are the most advanced species we've encountered. This could be the beginning of a new era for human development." Linda Reeves, the chief xenolinguist, raised her hand. "Ambassador, I've been studying the latest Vicari communication patterns. There are some inconsistencies I can't explain." "What kind of inconsistencies?" Frank asked. Linda frowned. "It's subtle. Their language has multiple layers of meaning. The primary layer is always friendly, but sometimes I detect something else underneath. I can't quite translate it yet." Frank made a mental note to have Linda work on this priority once they boarded the Vicari ship. "Keep digging. Understanding their true intentions is why we're going in person." The departure ceremony was brief. No speeches, no fanfare. Humanity had learned that in space, the quieter the send-off, the better the luck. Frank took his place on the bridge of the Concord beside Captain Greg Winters, a stocky man with a calm demeanor that inspired confidence. "Ready to make history, Ambassador?" Greg asked. "Ready as I'll ever be," Frank replied, watching the screens as the Concord separated from the station. The journey to the Vicari mother ship would take 6 hours. Frank used the time to review everything known about the aliens. They had appeared at the edge of the solar system without warning. Their massive ship simply appearing as if it had always been there. Their first message had been simple: we come to share knowledge. In the months that followed, information exchanges had been promising. The Vicari shared details about their propulsion systems, which worked on principles humans had barely begun to theorize about. In return, Earth sent them art, music, and literature. The Vicari seemed especially interested in human biology and social structures. When the Conquered finally approached the alien ship, everyone on the bridge fell silent. Up close, the crystalline vessel was even more impressive, easily 20 times the size of Earth's largest spacecraft. "We're receiving a transmission," announced the communications officer. The main screen lit up with the image of a Vicari. They were bipedal with iridescent skin that seemed to shift colors like oil on water. Their eyes were large with pupils that split vertically. And they had no visible nose, just breathing slits along their cheeks. Ambassador Patterson, the alien, spoke in perfect English, its voice created by a translation device. "We welcome you to our vessel. Docking instructions are being transmitted to your pilot." Frank stepped forward. "On behalf of Earth and all humanity, we thank you for this opportunity. We come in peace and friendship." The Vicari made a gesture with its four-fingered hand that their previous communications had identified as a sign of agreement. "We look forward to your arrival. There is much to discuss." As the transmission ended, Frank felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This was the moment humanity had been waiting for since first looking up at the stars and wondering if they were alone. The Conquered moved carefully into the docking bay of the alien ship. Through the viewports, Frank could see strange lights and shapes. Technology beyond human understanding. "Final checks," Captain Winters announced. "All systems secure. Atmosphere readings compatible with human biology. Radiation levels normal." Frank took a deep breath and straightened his uniform one last time. "Let's meet our new neighbors." As the airlock prepared to open, Frank couldn't help but think of Diane's warning. Behind him, he noticed Sam Miller subtly checking his concealed weapon. The door slid open, revealing a delegation waiting in a vast crystalline chamber. "Ready?" asked Captain Winters quietly. Frank nodded, his face composed into a diplomatic smile. "For Earth," he said, and stepped forward to meet humanity's future. The meeting. The first meeting with the Vicari went better than Frank had hoped. The aliens guided the human delegation through crystal hallways that seemed to glow from within. Frank noticed how the other humans kept looking up and around in wonder. Even Sam Miller, the security officer who was trained to hide his reactions, couldn't help but stare at the impossible architecture. "Your vessel is remarkable," Frank said to the lead Vicari, who had introduced itself as Nexar. "It has existed for 12 of your centuries," Nexar replied. Its voice came through a small device at its throat, translating the clicks and whistles of its natural speech into English. "We are pleased it impresses you." Nexar led them to a large round room where several other Vicari waited. The aliens stood in a perfect circle, their color-shifting skin creating patterns that seemed to move between them like a silent conversation. Frank stepped forward. "I bring greetings from Earth and all human colonies in our solar system. We hope this meeting marks the beginning of friendship between our peoples." The Vicari made that strange hand gesture again. Four fingers spreading wide then coming together. "We have studied your transmissions for many cycles," Nexar said. "Humans are interesting to us." Linda Reeves, the xenolinguist, whispered to Frank, "There's that double meaning again. The translation device is only giving us the surface layer." Frank nodded slightly to show he heard her. After 30 years in diplomacy, he knew that first meetings were always about feeling out the other side. The real talks would come later. "We have prepared spaces for you to live while you are here," Nexar continued. "We understand humans require regular periods of rest and privacy." "That's very thoughtful," Frank replied. "We've brought equipment to analyze atmospheric conditions and ensure compatibility." Nexar's large eyes blinked vertically. "Of course, safety is important," though we have already confirmed our environments can mix without harm. The Vicari showed them to their quarters. The rooms were clearly built for humans with furniture that resembled beds and chairs, though the proportions were slightly off. Frank wondered how the Vicari had learned so much about human needs. That night, the team gathered in Frank's room to share their first impressions. "They're hiding something," Sam said immediately. "They have guards posted at every junction, trying to look casual." Linda nodded in agreement. "Their language has layers we can't access yet. The surface meaning is always friendly, but there's something underneath." Dr. Alan Burke, the team's xenobiologist, had a different concern. "Did anyone notice they never touch each other, and they keep a specific distance from us at all times?" Frank considered all their observations. "We've only been here a few hours. Let's not jump to conclusions. Tomorrow, we start the real work." Over the next weeks, a pattern emerged. Each morning, the humans would meet with different Vicari specialists to exchange information. The aliens seemed most interested in human biology, social structures, and Earth's defense systems. "We wish to understand how humans organize," Nexar explained when Frank questioned their interest in military matters. "Your species forms hierarchies based on ability rather than genetic lineage. This is unusual." Frank shared only what was publicly available about Earth's defenses. "We believe in transparency, but we also believe in caution," he told Nexar. After 30 days on the Vicari ship, Frank sent his regular update to Earth. "The Vicari continued to be cooperative on the surface," he reported. "They've shared impressive technological knowledge, particularly about their faster-than-light travel methods. However, there are concerning patterns in their questions and behavior." Each week, Frank noticed subtle changes in how the Vicari treated them. The aliens began limiting which areas the humans could visit. They asked more pointed questions about human weaknesses and defense capabilities. During the 7th week, Linda made a breakthrough with the translation. "Ambassador," she said, bursting into Frank's room late at night. "I figured out part of the secondary language layer. When they say, 'interesting,' they mean, 'potentially useful.' When they say, 'friend,' the underlying meaning is closer to, 'subject for study.'" Frank felt a chill. "Keep working on it. I need to know everything they're really saying." The next day, Frank tested Linda's discovery. When Nexar mentioned friendship between their species, Frank watched closely. He saw the subtle shift in the alien's skin color, a pattern Linda had identified as indicating hidden meaning. That evening, Frank recorded a new message for Earth. "I have serious concerns about Vicari intentions. Their social structure is rigid and values genetic purity above all else. Our lack of biological purity seems to disturb them. They view diversity as weakness. Recommend caution in sharing further information." As days passed, the Vicari became less friendly. Their questions turned into demands. The spaces where humans could go shrank further. In their final meeting, Nexar's tone changed completely. "Your species is inefficient. You waste resources on inferior genetic lines. Yet, you have spread to multiple planets in your system. This is concerning." Frank kept his diplomatic face steady. "Diversity is our strength, not our weakness. Different perspectives help us solve problems in ways uniform thinking cannot." Nexar made a new gesture, one Frank hadn't seen before. "We have learned enough about humans for now. It is time for you to return to your vessel." That night, Frank called his team together. "Something's changed. They're sending us back earlier than planned. I don't like it." Sam nodded grimly. "The guard presence has doubled. They're watching us more openly now." "I've decoded more of their language," Linda said quietly. When Nexar said they've learned enough about humans, the underlying meaning was, completed assessment of threat level. Frank made his decision. "We leave tomorrow as they've requested. No arguments, no delays. Send a coded message to the Conquered to be ready for immediate departure." As Frank packed his belongings, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had failed somehow. 30 years of diplomatic experience told him negotiations had broken down, but he didn't understand why. The next morning, the humans were escorted to their ship in silence. No farewell ceremony, no promises of future contact. As the Concord pulled away from the Vicari mother ship, Captain Winters asked, "What happened in there, Ambassador?" Frank looked back at the crystalline vessel growing smaller in the view screen. "I'm not sure, but I think we just went from being potential friends to being something else entirely." What Frank didn't know was that this would be the last transmission Earth would receive from him for 23 long days. The aftermath. Admiral Diane Morris stood in Earth Fleet headquarters, staring at the large screen that showed the last known position of the Concord. 23 days had passed since the final transmission from Frank Patterson and his team. 23 days of silence that grew heavier with each passing hour. "Any changes?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Colonel Jason Reed, her second in command, shook his head. "Nothing, Admiral. All attempts to contact the Concord have failed. The Vicari mothership remains in the same position, but they're not responding to our messages either." Diane had known Frank for decades. He wouldn't stay silent this long without good reason. Something had gone terribly wrong. "Get me the crisis team," she ordered. Within an hour, the best minds of Earth's defense and intelligence forces gathered in the war room. Among them were Patricia Allen and John Rivera, the top analysts for alien communications. "We've been analyzing all previous messages from the Vicari," Patricia explained, bringing up charts on the main screen. "There are patterns we missed before." John Rivera nodded. Ambassador Patterson's linguist was right. Their language has multiple layers of meaning. We've been running their communications through new algorithms that detect subtle variations in their transmission frequencies. "What did you find?" Diane asked. John looked grim. "They've been lying to us from the beginning. The translation matrix shows their greeting messages contained embedded threats." Patricia brought up a new set of data. "Look at this phrase from their first contact, asterisk, we come to share knowledge. Asterisk, if you analyze the subharmonic frequencies, it actually translates closer to, asterisk, we come to evaluate your worth. Asterisk." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "So, the diplomatic mission was never about friendship," Diane said quietly. "They were assessing us as a potential threat or as potential subjects," added Dr. Karen Powell, the chief xenobiologist. "Based on Ambassador Patterson's reports, the Vicari seem obsessed with genetic purity. They might see us as an inferior species." Diane made a decision. "Prepare reconnaissance drones. I want eyes on that Vicari ship without alerting them." "That could be seen as an aggressive act," Colonel Reed warned. "Frank and his team have been missing for over 3 weeks," Diane replied firmly. "I'm done waiting." Before the drones could be deployed, Earth's long-range sensors detected movement. A small Vicari vessel had broken away from the mother ship and was heading directly toward Earth. "It's too small to be the Concord," Colonel Reed reported. "Single craft, no life signs detected, minimal power signatures." "An automated vessel," Diane wondered aloud. "What are they sending us?" The small Vicari ship moved slowly but steadily toward Earth. Defense systems tracked its approach. Weapons locked on but holding fire. Diane ordered a perimeter of ships to intercept it before it got too close to Earth. Lieutenant Sandra Martinez led the boarding team. Her voice came through clearly on the command center speakers as she reported their findings. "Admiral, the vessel appears to be an automated delivery system. There's a single cargo container aboard. No crew, no weapons, just a navigation system programmed to reach Earth orbit." "What's in the container?" Diane asked, a sense of dread building inside her. There was a long pause before Sandra's voice returned, shaking slightly. "Admiral, you need to see this." The video feed showed what the boarding team had discovered. Diane felt her blood turn cold. Inside the container were the remains of Ambassador Frank Patterson and his entire diplomatic team. They had been systematically taken apart. Their bodies preserved in clear cases like scientific specimens. "There's some kind of data crystal attached to the main case," Sandra reported. "Bring it all back to headquarters," Diane ordered, her voice tight with controlled fury. "Full quarantine protocols. I want that crystal analyzed immediately." Hours later, in a secure lab, John Rivera and Patricia Allen successfully decoded the message crystal. "It's a simple text message," John reported in perfect English. The message appeared on screens throughout the command center. "Humans are biologically inferior. Your continued existence is offensive to galactic harmony. You will be eliminated." Diane stared at the words, thinking of Frank Patterson's last reports about the Vicari's disturbing interest in human genetics and their concept of purity. "They sent them back like lab specimens," Dr. Powell said, her voice breaking. "They didn't even see them as people." Colonel Reed turned to Diane. "This is an act of war." "Yes," Diane agreed. "It is." She ordered the room cleared except for her most senior officers. "The President needs to see this immediately. Prepare a full briefing." President Keith Bowman arrived within the hour, his face grave as he reviewed the evidence. The sight of Ambassador Patterson's remains affected him visibly, but he maintained his composure. "They've left us no choice," he said simply. That evening, President Bowman addressed the unified nations of Earth, the lunar colonies, and the Mars settlements. His speech was brief and to the point. "Today we received proof that peaceful coexistence with the Vicari is impossible," he said, his words reaching every corner of human civilization. "They have murdered our ambassador and his entire team in a deliberate act of hostility. They have declared their intention to eliminate our species." He paused, letting the reality sink in for billions of viewers. For the first time in 50 years, Earth is declaring a state of interstellar war. May God help us all. The response was immediate. Shipyards across the solar system shifted to military production. Training centers filled with volunteers. Scientists who have been working on peaceful projects now turned their minds to defense and weapons technology. Admiral Morris took command of Earth's rapidly expanding fleet. In her private office, she kept a picture of Frank Patterson on her desk. "We'll make this right, Frank," she whispered to the image of her old friend. "They'll pay for what they did to you." What the Vicari didn't understand, what they couldn't understand with their rigid thinking, was how humans responded to threats. Throughout human history, nothing united people faster than a common enemy. Old rivalries were forgotten. Resources were shared. Innovations happened at unprecedented speed. The Vicari had made a fatal miscalculation. They had studied human biology and technology, but they had failed to understand human spirit. They thought sending back Earth's ambassador in pieces would break humanity's will. Instead, it had only made it stronger. In the darkness of her office, Admiral Morris reviewed the initial battle plans. The war had begun, and she intended to make sure the Vicari regretted their actions for generations to come. The war. 6 weeks after Earth declared war, Admiral Diane Morris stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, the largest warship humans had ever built. Around her, officers worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. The ship hummed with power as it led a fleet of 50 vessels toward their first major confrontation with the Vicari. "Status report," Diane ordered. Colonel Jason Reed responded promptly. "All ships in formation, Admiral. Weapon systems at full capacity. Dr. Cruz's quantum disruption technology has been installed on all vessels and tested successfully." Diane nodded. The Vicari had made a critical mistake. During the 72 days of diplomatic communication, they had revealed far more about their technology than they realized. Dr. Olivia Cruz had been a brilliant physicist before the war. Now she was the head of Earth's Defense Technology Division, and she had made a discovery that would change everything. 2 weeks earlier, Dr. Cruz had presented her findings to the War Council. The Vicari ships rely on crystalline computing cores, she had explained, pointing to diagrams on the large screen. These cores operate on predictable quantum frequencies. They thought we were too primitive to understand their technology, so they never bothered to encrypt their ship-to-ship communications properly. Can we use this against them? Diane had asked. Olivia's eyes had lit up. We can do more than that. We can shut their ships down completely. Now, as the Earth fleet approached the edge of the Alpha Centauri system where the Vicari had established a forward base, Diane thought about how quickly humans had adapted to this threat. They thought we were primitive, she said softly. They're about to learn how wrong they were. The Vicari had expanded aggressively since their declaration of hostilities. They had taken control of 3 star systems beyond their own territory, including Alpha Centauri, Earth's closest stellar neighbor. Long-range scans showed 8 Vicari warships orbiting the 3rd planet. The crystalline vessels were larger than Earth's ships, their surfaces gleaming in the light of Alpha Centauri's twin suns. They've detected us, reported Lieutenant William Harris from the sensor station. Vicari vessels are moving to intercept. Hold formation, Diane ordered. Activate stealth protocols on the flanking ships. This was another human innovation. 20 smaller ships in the fleet carried technology that could mask their presence from Vicari sensors. While the main fleet drew attention, these ships moved silently to strategic positions. The Vicari ships approached in a perfect formation, moving with the precision that came from their hive-like social structure. Their first communication came through on all channels. Human vessels, you have entered territory now under Vicari protection. Your inferior technology cannot hope to prevail. Surrender and submit to processing. Diane's face hardened at the cold clinical tone. Processing likely meant the same fate that had befallen Frank Patterson and his team. No response, she instructed the communications officer. Maintain radio silence. The Vicari ships continued their approach, apparently confident in their superiority. They had no reason to believe the humans could threaten them. The Vicari had studied human technology during the diplomatic exchanges and found it wanting. What they didn't know was that humans had been studying them too. Range to target? Diane asked. 30 seconds to optimal disruption range, Colonel Reed replied. Diane opened a channel to the entire Earth fleet. All ships, prepare to execute Operation Righteous Fury on my mark. Remember Ambassador Patterson and his team. Remember why we fight. The tension on the bridge was palpable as the seconds counted down. The Vicari ships were now clearly visible on the main view screen, their weapon systems powering up. Now, Diane ordered. Across the Earth fleet, special emitters activated simultaneously. They broadcast precisely calibrated quantum signals that matched the operating frequencies of the Vicari crystalline cores. On the view screen, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The Vicari ships stuttered in space, their sleek movements becoming jerky as their systems failed. Lights flickered across their hulls as power fluctuated wildly. It's working, Colonel Reed reported, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. Launch fighters, Diane commanded. Target their propulsion systems first, then weapons. Smaller craft poured from the Earth ships, moving with a flexibility and unpredictability that contrasted sharply with the Vicari's rigid formations. The human pilots had trained for this moment, flying simulations based on everything learned about Vicari ships. The Vicari vessels struggled to respond. Their once superior technology now their greatest weakness. Their crystalline computing cores, receiving conflicting quantum signals, couldn't coordinate their defense systems effectively. The stealth ships are in position, announced Lieutenant Harris. Execute Phase 2, Diane ordered. The hidden Earth vessels revealed themselves, activating even more powerful disruption emitters from behind the Vicari fleet. Caught in a crossfire of quantum interference, the alien ships began to drift helplessly. Dr. Cruz's voice came through on a private channel. It's even more effective than our simulations predicted, Admiral. Their technology is completely dependent on those crystalline cores. They have no backup systems. The battle that the Vicari had expected to be a simple extermination of inferior beings had turned into something entirely different. Human fighters swarmed around the disabled alien ships, precisely targeting key systems with specialized weapons. Within 2 hours, 7 of the 8 Vicari vessels had been completely neutralized. Their crews were contained, their weapons disabled, their communications cut off from the Vicari home world. The 8th ship, carrying what appeared to be the Vicari commander, attempted to escape by activating an emergency jump drive. The desperation of the maneuver was evident as the crystalline ship shuddered, parts of its structure already failing. "Should we stop them?" Colonel Reed asked. Diane watched the struggling vessel. "No, let them go. Let them take the news back to their leaders. Let them tell the story of what happened here today." As the damaged Vicari ship limped away, disappearing into the darkness of space, a cheer went up across the Earth fleet. It was the first major victory in a war that many had feared would be impossible to win. Diane didn't join the celebration. She stared at the disabled Vicari ships now under Earth's control, thinking about what would come next. "This is just the beginning," she said to Colonel Reed. "They underestimated us once. They won't make that mistake again." Reed nodded in agreement. "But we won't underestimate ourselves again either." The battle at Alpha Centauri would later be recognized as the turning point in the war. It proved that humanity could not only stand against the Vicari, but could defeat them through innovation, adaptability, and courage. As the Earth fleet secured their position in the Alpha Centauri system, Diane sent a simple message back to Earth: Operation Righteous Fury successful. The path to the Vicari home world is open, ****. The real war had just begun. The surrender. 8 months after the battle at Alpha Centauri, Admiral Diane Morris stood on the surface of the Vicari home world. The sky above her was a strange purple color, and the air smelled faintly of cinnamon. Around her, a mix of human and Vicari architecture created a striking contrast between the crystalline structures of the aliens and the practical metal buildings erected by Earth forces. The war had not gone as the Vicari expected. After their defeat at Alpha Centauri, Earth forces had pushed steadily toward Vicari space. Along the way, they discovered something surprising. 3 other alien species had been conquered by the Vicari Empire. These species, the plant-like Thiel, the aquatic Maurici, and the insectoid Zenturi, had suffered under Vicari rule for centuries. When human forces liberated their worlds, these species joined the fight against their former masters. The war became not just about revenge for Ambassador Patterson and his team, but about freedom for all species under Vicari control. Now, after 8 months of hard fighting, it was finally over. The Vicari Supreme Leader approached Diane, flanked by guards from both species. Like all Vicari, the leader's skin shifted colors as it moved, but the once proud rainbow patterns were now dull and muted. "We are prepared to offer our surrender," the Vicari leader said through a translator. "The terms you have sent are harsh." Diane thought of Frank Patterson and the diplomatic team, their bodies returned in pieces. She thought of the countless human and allied lives lost in the fighting. She could have demanded the Vicar's complete destruction. Many on Earth would have supported such a decision. Instead, she had chosen a different path. "The terms are non-negotiable," she replied firmly. "Complete demilitarization, reparations to all affected species, integration into the Galactic Cooperative." The Vicari leader's skin rippled with what humans now understood was an expression of distress. "And what guarantees do we have that humans will not seek further revenge?" "The same guarantee we had when you threatened to eliminate our species," Diane answered. "None. But unlike you, we do not destroy those we defeat. We offer a chance for redemption." This was the human way. Fierce in battle, but measured in victory. Throughout the war, Earth forces had been careful to minimize civilian casualties among the Vicari. They had targeted military installations and government centers, avoiding population areas whenever possible. The Vakari leader seemed confused by this approach. In their rigid worldview, the strong completely dominated the weak. Mercy was an alien concept to them. "We accept your terms," the leader finally said, making the formal gesture of submission that humans had learned during the conflict. With those words, the interstellar war officially ended. But for humanity, something else was just beginning. Back on Earth 1 month later, crowds gathered at the newly completed diplomatic memorial. At its center stood a holographic projection of Ambassador Frank Patterson and his team rotating slowly above a simple granite base. The inscription read, "They gave their lives so we would understand the true nature of our enemy." President Keith Bowman spoke at the dedication ceremony. "We went to war because we had no choice," he told the assembled crowd and the billions watching from across human space. "We found victory because we remained true to our highest ideals even in our darkest hour." Admiral Morris, now wearing the insignia of Supreme Commander of the newly formed Galactic Defense Force, stood nearby. The GDF included ships and personnel not just from Earth, but from all the liberated species. Their mission was to ensure peace throughout known space and prevent any civilization from dominating others, as the Vakari had once done. After the ceremony, Diane walked alone through the memorial gardens. She stopped at a small fountain where a private plaque honored her old friend. "You would have been surprised by how it all turned out, Frank," she said quietly. "The Vakari thought they were teaching us a lesson when they sent you back. Instead, you taught us one final lesson about who we really are." In the years that followed, humanity's reputation spread throughout the galaxy. New species were discovered. New alliances formed. The Galactic Cooperative expanded, creating a stability that benefited all its members, including the reformed Vakari. Dr. Olivia Cruz, whose discovery of the Vakari weakness had been crucial to Earth's victory, now led a multi-species research team. They studied the collective knowledge of all known civilizations, making breakthroughs that would have been impossible for any single species working alone. The Vakari believed genetic purity was strength, she often said in her lectures. They couldn't understand that diversity, biological, cultural, intellectual, is the true source of innovation. 5 years after the war ended, a new vessel prepared for its maiden voyage. Named the UES Frank Patterson, it was the first ship designed specifically for diplomatic missions since the destruction of the conquered. Its crew included humans, Thorol, Maurici, Zenturi, and even 2 Vakari specialists who had chosen to work with the cooperative. Before the ship departed, Supreme Commander Morris addressed the crew. "You carry on the mission that Ambassador Patterson began," she told them. "To seek friendship among the stars, but never forget the price of naivety. Be open, be fair, be kind, but always be watchful." The story of Earth's first interstellar war spread throughout the galaxy, passed from species to species. Most found it difficult to understand the seeming contradiction at its heart, how a civilization could fight with such ferocity, yet show such restraint in victory. The older species in the galaxy, those who had watched civilizations rise and fall for millennia, perhaps understood it best. In their archives, they recorded the irony that would define humanity's place in galactic history. In their arrogance, the Vakari had awakened a sleeping giant. By returning Earth's ambassador in shreds, they had triggered their own downfall and humanity's ascension. When asked about Earth's surprising mercy toward their defeated enemy, Admiral Morris would always give the same answer. "We went to war because we had to," she would say. "We showed mercy because that's who we are." And in the end, that was the true victory. Not just surviving the Vakari threat, but doing so without losing what made humanity worth saving in the first place. As the UES Frank Patterson disappeared into the darkness of space, carrying Earth's hopes for a more peaceful future, Admiral Morris watched from her office window. The stars seemed brighter somehow, full of promise rather than threat. "Safe travels," she whispered, though no one could hear her. "All of you."